Hi everyone, my name is Ken Eddleston. I'm the Senior Lighting Specialist at Chalmit, based here in Glasgow. Firstly, thank you for all of those who dialed in last week to listen to me talk during the 2 external webinar sessions that I hosted. Due to some technical issues, mainly to do with the internet connections that we had here, the recorded webinar that we did later in the day was a little bit slow, a bit laggy, so we decided to re-record the following week. Hopefully this turns out a lot clearer and easier for you all to follow and understand. Okay, so exactly the same presentation as I delivered last week, and I will address some of the questions that were raised during the 2 sessions at the end of this presentation itself. Okay, so here today to talk about the Protecta X, our new game-changing LED Zone 1 linear product. Something very, very different, and certainly some of the mantra that we've been saying out in the public for the last, well, probably 6 months to a year, has really been trying to break the linear mold. We're doing something a little bit different to what we've done in the past, and we want to challenge the mindsets of people out there. A linear product doesn't need to be a 2-foot and a 4-foot style or boat style linear, as I would call it, anymore. It can be whatever you need it to be. Our focus, our aim was really to try and make it as compact, small and functional without losing the performance of your traditional 2-foot and 4-foot linear products. And we believe we have achieved that in the Protecta X. Some of the main features that I'll discuss and that I'll talk about during this presentation are contained within this first slide. But just to talk you through it, so we have 50% energy savings straight off the bat versus traditional fluorescent fixtures. If I compare the 2x36 watt Protecta fluorescent, that has, the non-emergency has 70 watts of power consumption for the product. The Protecta X is 35 watts, so 50% straight away by just going to an LED product. With that, we can also achieve a market-leading efficacy of 135 lumens per watt. Now, please bear in mind that this is based on the emergency. So the emergency will draw a little bit more power just to ensure that the battery is charged and regulated. Okay. So what that essentially means is that the non-emergency products, i.e. the ones without integral batteries or internal batteries, will be around about 145 lumens per watt as a minimum. Okay, again, market leading. There's no one else out there in the Zone 1 LED linear market that can achieve that efficacy. The third point is the optimized lumen outputs, and I have a couple of slides dedicated to that later on, but really it's about the optics that we utilize in the product. So we have a variety of optics in the Luminaire that will allow you to, depending on how you utilize them and where you utilize them, i.e. the applications that the product is going in, you can really achieve the maximum benefits, full project savings that the Luminaire will allow. The final point on here is to do with the system life of the Luminaire. Now, we are trying to refer a little bit more to system life with our products going forward. And what that essentially means is the time to first component failure. Okay, LEDs in reality will probably outlast most of the projects, but you really need to be mindful of that L70. What you're probably more interested in, though, is at what point do you need to do your first replacements, your first bit of maintenance on the product, and that's why we've introduced system life. Okay, so the maximum system life we can achieve out of the product is 120,000 hours at an ambient of 25 degrees, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So just to step through the product specification, a lot of this presentation will be focused on the double wing version, what I call what is the O5L version, as you can see the image on your screen now. We do also have a single wing, an O2L model, which will be equivalent to your 2-foot traditional linears. The double wing is equivalent to the 4-foot traditional linears. Okay, both are available as standard or emergency. Probably what you will see more, or what you will have more demand for, is the double wing version. From our own point of view, roughly we sell in the region of 75% 4-foots and 25% foots. Okay, so we expect to see similar ratios with the Protecta X. The product is fully certified for both ATEX and IEC X areas for Zone 1 and 21. We've essentially ticked off every letter of the alphabet and the coding, but please bear in mind that Luminaire is an EXE product. What that means is that we can have a lighter, more compact solution for zone 1. EXD luminaires tend to be a little bit more heavy, a bit more robust, so to contain an explosion, essentially. Okay, E eliminates that from happening. So although it is an EXE luminaire, there are elements of the product, or components within the product that have individual component certification. Okay, so there's EXD components in there. The LEDs are encapsulated for M. And of course, the LEDs also must comply with the OPIS requirements, optical inherent safety. Okay. A lot of this conversation as well, a lot of this presentation will be based on the Zone 1 version, but please bear in mind we do also have an industrial model as well. Only real difference is in the part codes. So rather than PRXB for Zone 1, we have PRXI for industrial. Okay. Visibly, I mean, essentially the product looks the same from the outside. The only visible difference that you will notice is that there is no potting around the LEDs in the industrial model. Okay. All of our LED products going forward as well our aim is to use a universal voltage supply in the product. So it will achieve both an AC and a DC. It can be used off both an AC and a DC supply. And really the focus for that, the reason for that is we're seeing more movement towards centralized battery systems. So a lot of our products will need to be able to accommodate both the change in input supply, and this luminaire can do that with 110 to 277 volt AC and 127 to 250 volt DC. The product as well has an ambient range of -40 to +60, okay, which will pretty much accommodate most of the extreme ambience that we see in the world there. Following page, marine grade aluminium enclosure. So the product is fully metallic. The only bit of plastic that you can see from the outside of the product is with the polycarbonate diffusers on the wings. Okay, this is a clear polycarbonate lens. As standard for the non-emergency product, you will have 4 times M20, but on the emergency, one of those cable entries is given up to the battery stick, which I'll show you a little bit more later on. Please bear in mind as well that M25 is available and it's a selectable option on the product. As is standard for all most of our product ranges, to be fair, we can achieve an IP66, IP67 rating to the EN 60529 standard, and we can also achieve a IK10 impact rating, which is the maximum IK rating available. That's a maximum impact of 20 joules. Please bear in mind, though, that your IK ratings are based on an impact test with the luminaire unconditioned. Okay. For all hazardous area products, they must also be impact tested, but after conditioning. But typically that is 4 joules and 7 joules, depending on where on the product. Okay, but that's after the product has been aged, so a worst case essentially. As standard, we are offering the product with 4 mil square terminations, but you can also have 6 mil squared optional, which tends to be your screwed connections. The 4 mil is a push to make terminal block on the product. We'll also have looping at one end and through wiring as standard. And as far as the LEDs go, we are offering cool white as standard, which is around about 5,000 Kelvin, with an option for 4,000 Kelvin as well. Now, we are seeing some movement towards the warm white end of the spectrum, so please, if you have any demand or your customers have any requirements for a different color temperature, then please feed that back to your local sales engineer, who will then feed that back to myself, or by all means, drop me an email. Okay. I've already touched on the market-leading efficacy on there, so I won't dwell on that point any further. But we have a variety of optics on the product: a wide beam, a medium beam, and an asymmetric beam. I'll show you some examples and I'll show you some closer detailed images of those solutions and how you can use them to their optimum. We also have recently launched an opal diffuser on the product. All that really means is that rather than the clear polycarbonate diffuser that you currently have on the wing, you can swap that out for an opal or a frosted diffuser. Now, I see that as a one solution fits all type product. So, for example, if you or your customer wants to use one version of Protecta X across their entire site, they would either be looking at the wide beam solution or the Opal solution. But please bear in mind that the Opal, if you choose to go with an Opal diffuser on the product, you will lose some light. More material in front of the light will lose some of the light output of the product itself, but you also negate the impact of the optics being utilized in the product. Okay. The next point is regards to the emergency solution. So the hot swappable nickel metal hydride battery stick. For those of you that aren't familiar, hot swappable essentially means that the battery stick can be changed, replaced, maintained, whatever you need to do while the luminaire is still energized. So you don't need to isolate power. You don't need to isolate power to access the front cover or get inside the product. You can do all this from outside of the luminaire itself. And I'll show you something. I'll show you a video, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Probably the only other point to note on this, so it is nickel-based technology, but not the same nickel cadmium that we've historically used. Okay. As far as outputs in emergency modes, I've listed these outputs here. So we get 50% for 90 minutes or 25% for 3 hours on the single wing O2L model, or 25% for 90 minutes and 12.5 or 12.5% for 3 hours on the O5L double wing model. What that essentially means is that the output in emergency mode is the same for both variants. Okay, so you'll achieve a very, very similar, I mean, it's almost identical emergency output off a battery backup. What that means practically is that you could potentially look at reducing or use the O2L as an emergency solution. Okay, you don't have to focus all your if emergency lighting is the main criteria. It allows a bit more flexibility to potentially use the O2L single wing product across your facility. Okay, which will be a more cost-effective solution for that. The final point on this slide, and again, I'll talk a bit more about that later on, but the final point is regards to battery management and automatic self-test functionality. So we've brought that back into the Protecta X with a bi-colored LED indicator to give you a quick visual status indication of the battery within the product itself. Okay, and I've got a slide for that later. As far as the mounting accessories, so the Protecta X has the same fixing centers as the 2-foot Protecta GRP. So that's a 400 mil fixing centers on the back of the product. With that, we use the same mounting accessories as we have in the current Protecta range, but we have also introduced an additional 4-foot adapter bracket, which is essentially a top hat type shape, which allows you to pick up the existing 4-foot fixing centers that you might have installed in your facility project, whatever that may be. Okay, so it's just an adapter bracket to allow for retrofitting to existing 4-foot linears. Now, I talked at the start a little bit about luminaire system life. So the way we have achieved a pretty phenomenal lifetime out of the product is due to design more than anything else. So what you can't quite see on this image is that there is a small air gap between the wing and the central body enclosure. Now, part of the process, part of the design that we wanted to adapt and adopt was just to ensure that the two biggest heat generating components are kept separated. So that's referring to the LEDs and the driver. By separating them out, they're not acting against each other, but allowing an air gap between those components also helps to some extent. So it helps 3 ways. One, it allows for airflow, helping to wick away the thermals being generated by mainly the LEDs, and help dissipate that temperature, help dissipate the heat. It also allows for water runoff, again, doing exactly the same process, same procedure. But that water runoff also helps to clear away any dirt and quite honestly bird muck that builds up on the back of the product. Okay, so all of this helps to improve the thermal efficiency of the product and achieve the lifetimes that we would expect or that we set the development team to achieve. Okay, So with all that in mind, the LED lifetime, and I mentioned at the start that your L70 life is pretty phenomenal out of most LEDs. The L70 lifetime at the maximum rated ambient of the product, so a sustained ambient of 60 degrees, will still be greater than 200,000 hours. To put that into years, that's roughly 22 years, 23 years potentially, with the luminaire on 24 hours a day. That's phenomenal. Now, I talked at the start about system life. Now, the time to first component failure, that's the most important part. Now, for most LED products, if not all LED products, that is typically the driver within the luminaire itself. So the time to replace the driver within the product is around about 120,000 hours at 25 degrees, which is the maximum you can achieve from the drivers in the product. But I think a more impressive number is the 90,000 hours at the maximum rated ambient of 60 degrees. I'm sure all of you are aware that LEDs and electronics on the whole do not like high temperatures. They also don't like extreme low temperatures, but there's definitely a balancing act that required there. Okay, but essentially the point to take away here is that at a sustained ambient of 60 degrees, your luminaire will still achieve round about, the Protecta X luminaire will still achieve round about 10 years before you need to do any component replacement. Okay, sustained temperature of 60. The final point on here is just to do with DALI. It is something that we are looking to incorporate and should hopefully be available this year. For those of you that aren't familiar, DALI is a system that's been around for a number of years. It's a wired communication system or control system, whatever you'd like to call it, that allows you to control the performance or output of that product throughout the day. So for instance, you could define, or the end user could define that the luminaire is on 100% in the hours of darkness, 50% in the twilight hours, and off during daylight hours. Okay. It also feeds back the status of the luminaire and advises if there's any luminaires on your circuit that are out, that are not working. However, please bear in mind that DALI, as I said, is a wired system, so you need to have the infrastructure available. DALI luminaires will use an additional 2 cores on a cable, and there are 2 specific DALI cables for those cable types. Okay. The next couple of slides are all available in the product data sheet, so I'm not going to dwell too long on these, but just to point out the difference here between your O2L type product and your O5L. So your O2L model, as I said earlier on, is your equivalent to your 2-foot boat style linear product. I would suggest this is more application specific. You're going to be looking at low mounting applications, i.e. in the handrails for walkways, for instance, or even localized lighting of critical equipment, panels, etc., where you really want to kind of focus light and ensure safety, for instance. Your double wing O5L model will be more of your one solution fits all product across your facility, just because it gives you the higher output and better performance. I've listed the wattages and the outputs here, and again, this is all available on the product data sheet. Okay. Next slides, just to show you the general dimensions of the product. So all I really want to highlight on these is just one, the fixing centers. So your 400mm fixing centers on the back of the product itself, which matches your 2-foot linear Protecta and others. But one point to note is with regards to the end caps. So whether you go standard or emergency, this side will always be the same. But if you have a standard, you will have an additional 2 M20 or M25 cable entries on this side. Whereas if you go for the emergency, you give up one of the cable entries for the battery stick, the externally accessible battery stick. Same again for the O2L model, as you can see here. So same end cap on this side, but whether you go standard, you get an additional 2 M20 or M25, and on the emergency, you give up one of the cable entries for the battery stick again. Okay. So comparing the dimensions. So looking at the performance of, looking at comparing against a 4-foot boat style Protecta, or the Protecta 3 GRP, and the metallic Protecta X below it. Okay, so we've dramatically reduced the length of the product, going from 1.4 meters thereabouts to half a meter, essentially. We've reduced the height by about a third, going from 147 to 93. What that essentially means is that you can potentially use the luminaire where you might have had issues with vertical access, for instance, or even mount them on the underside of cable trays without causing any significant obtrusion to users and people walking by. Okay. With regards to the width, we've increased it slightly on the double wing version. I guess that's what happens when you reduce the height. You need to increase it out a little bit. But as far as the single wing goes, it's pretty much the same width, 209 versus 206 on the product. Looking at the weight differences though, so please bear in mind, so this is the Protecta X versus the GRP Protecta 3s, okay, both fluorescent and LED. So this is a fully metallic product against GRP enclosures, GRP and polycarbonate enclosures. So this metallic Protecta X is lighter than both of these variants. So in the case of the non-emergency, the Protecta X is 0.4 kilos lighter than the fluorescent and 2.4 kilos lighter than the LED. This becomes even more significant when you go to the emergencies. So it's 1.3 kilos lighter than the fluorescent and 3.4 kilos lighter than the LED. Now, that's significant on its own, but if we look at perhaps slightly optimistic project quantities of 1,000 units, it becomes even more dramatic. Your savings, your weight savings are now in the tons. Okay? All engineers, all projects are looking at ways to save at this moment, whether it be power, whether it be weight, and of course, cost, money. This all adds to the overall project savings, the overall project picture that we're trying to build with the product. So with that in mind, I mean, a lot of the things that we've incorporated into the Protecta X has been based on our experiences, our project issues potentially that we've had over the decades, really. We believe we've got solutions here that are satisfying customers all around the world, providing global solutions with various applications, various features within the product itself. Probably the feature that we've had the best and most positive response on thus far has been the hot swappable battery stick, which is what you see on your screen right now. So it's really come about from our experiences with batteries, and we're certainly not alone in this. I think everybody has had a negative experience with batteries at some point or another. Now, when batteries, it's two examples really. When batteries are stored for a long period of time, and I'm talking greater than 6 months, probably greater than a year, realistically, or the battery is left without power for a long period of time, then it's at risk of going into a deep discharge state. Now, this deep discharge state is often unrecoverable. So the only solution really is to buy new batteries. And you can imagine how frustrated and angry people are if they've got an emergency product that they haven't even used as an emergency product and they need to buy replacements for. Okay. This has really come about, I guess, from offshore more than anything else, where it's pretty typical for emergency luminaires to be ordered, installed, commissioned, and then for power to be switched off for 12 months, as I said before, while they continue to build the rest of the vessel. Okay, so really it's about long-term storage and the batteries without power for a long period of time. Okay, 12 months in that kind of region plus. So by using a hot swappable battery stick, this gives you a bit of flexibility, or gives your customers a bit of flexibility. You can remove and replace the battery stick in less than a minute. Please bear in mind that for any hazardous area product, you cannot remove, you cannot replace components by hand. So you need an Allen key to loosen off the battery stick before you can then get your hand and take it out the rest of the way. Okay. It also utilizes nickel metal hydride technology. So this really has come about from, we wanted to try and utilize as much new technology as possible, or I should perhaps say newer technology as possible. Nickel metal hydride is not new battery technology. It has been around for a while, but it is still nickel based. And for those of you that are familiar, pretty much all of our emergency products previously all use nickel cadmium batteries. That's pretty common across the industry, and for good reason. Nickel based technologies tend to be very robust in the extreme temperatures, the extreme ambience that these projects are often in. So it's still a nickel-based battery cell, which means it's still very robust in high temperatures. Please bear in mind, though, that batteries across the board do not like low temperatures. So anything below sub-zero really becomes, can be a challenge, sorry. But if by going from nickel cadmium to nickel metal hydride, what we've essentially done is nickel metal hydride has a greater power density in a smaller form. So we could reduce the diameter of the battery cell, we could reduce the length of the battery cell. All of this adds to a reduction in weight in the battery solution, okay? If we'd stuck with the same nickel cadmium battery stick that we use in our current Protecta series, the battery stick would be longer than the Luminaire itself. Okay, so we want to try and incorporate as much new battery technology or much new technology in the product as possible. Okay. I have a short video here just to show you the battery stick and how it moves in and out of the product itself. As I said, it's a very, very quick solution. We'll have a formal video launched very soon that you'll all be able to view with additional information on that itself. So once you need to remove the battery stick, you have to use your Allen key, slack it off, and then you can take the battery stick the rest of the way out with your hand. Okay, remove it, replace it, do whatever you need to do, and all of this can be done while the Luminaire is still energized and on. Okay. One point to note. So I've mentioned about being able to hot swap the battery with ease and being able to do that at a later date. But what I haven't mentioned is the option for customers to order the emergency solution at a later date, or the battery stick at a later date. We're trying to give a bit more flexibility to end users that we haven't had in the past. So they have two options. I mean, one, because of the hot swappable nature of the battery stick, they can still order replacement batteries and do that change out much quicker than they have been able to do in the past. But two, what we've given people an option for is the option to order the Luminaire without the battery stick fitted. And apologies, I'm going to skip back a slide there. In that particular instance, they will need to use a specific part code on the product, which I'll highlight later on. But they will need to use, so when they order it with that specific suffix, the Luminaire will only come with this end cap here, essentially a plug. And what that plug does is maintains the IP rating of the product. So you can use it, you can continue to use it. It will still operate as a normal Luminaire, but it won't have the battery stick installed. So when they order that, they'll just get the plug. And then whenever the vessel, the ship, whatever it is ready to move to the next stage or set sail, they can then order the battery sticks in advance of that happening and do the change out. Okay, so they would only need to order the batteries once in the introduction of that Luminaire or initial installation. Okay. In addition to all of that, we have also reintroduced the battery commissioning and self-test functionality in the product. Now, this is essentially an automated process that takes away some of the manual processes that are still commonly used across a lot of facilities right now. It's not uncommon for end users, operators, whoever, to do a manual self-test where they would literally go and switch off power and time it with a stopwatch and see how long that battery is going to run for. This takes away a lot of that manual process and of course takes away a lot of cost associated with that manual process. So we wanted to make sure that this was simple, clean, and easy to understand, and hopefully we'll get that point across in this slide. So as far as the commissioning goes, the battery or the Luminaire, the emergency Luminaire, will go through a commissioning process whenever you insert the battery stick into the product. Okay. So battery commissioning cycle is essentially a charge, and discharge cycle, just to ensure that just to understand the battery memory, to understand the maximum capacity of that battery, and And then after it has done that, it will carry out a first test at a random interval up to 102 days after initial power up. Now, it's a random interval really to ensure that all your emergency products are not going through the self-test at the same time. Okay, so it's staggered across your facility. After that initial first test, the inverter will then carry out a complete battery discharge test every subsequent 102 days after that. Okay, so essentially they will go through a self-test 3 times a year. As a nice little visual indicator in the product, you can see on the emergency product, on the emergency version, one of the wings will have what is called a light pipe. Below this light pipe is a bi-colored LED that will flash or will either be red or green to determine the status of that luminaire and battery. So we tried to strip it back, make it nice and simple for users. So flashing green means that the battery is charging. It's a simple traffic light system. Solid green means the battery is fully charged or it's going through the self-test. Flashing red means that there's a battery fault detected, including no battery fitted. So this is an important one because it's one visual indicator to advise customers, operators, users, whoever that is, that the battery stick has not been fitted in the product itself. This is when you order it without the batteries fitted initially. Okay, so the luminaire or the LED will flash red under this light pipe. Okay, in addition to that, the plug or the cap that I mentioned on the previous slide that is used to maintain the IP rating of the product when there's no battery fitted will also have a red and white sticker on the outside just to say no battery fitted. So there's 2 visual indicators there for customers and users to advise them that it needs a battery for it to be used correctly. The final status is a solid red, and this essentially means there's a self-test failure, i.e. the battery has not achieved the duration that is expected, the 90 minutes or the 3-hour duration. So this slide is looking at the optics that are available with the Protecta X itself. Now, as standard, if you put the standard part code on the product, the wide beam optic, what I like to call the bubble optic, it's roughly a 120-degree beam spread, and it will be a more solution across. We also have a medium beam optic, which is like a square type optic, which gives you a beam spread of around 80 degrees. So a little bit tighter, and it allows you to potentially use the product in different applications. For example, a low bay or virgin on areas. It's also good for localized lighting or lighting of a critical equipment. So really where you want to focus that light on a particular area. The third optic is really the clever optic. Now this is one that we strongly recommend that you design in. You don't fit existing linears and replace it with the Protecta X with asymmetric optic, because you won't be reaping the maximum benefits that you can achieve with the product itself. Now, this asymmetric optic essentially works a bit like a street light. So you have one luminaire mounted up and down that roadway itself. This works exactly the same way. Okay, so when you orientate it in this manner, i.e. all the light is asymmetric along the length, so all the light is being thrown up and down along the length of the luminaire itself. If you rotate that at 90 degrees though, you get a dramatically different, okay, so in this orientation, so the light is thrown along the width of the product. Okay. So again, we strongly encourage that this is designed in, because by using the asymmetric optic, you can dramatically increase the spacing of the long walkway. So as far as the options go, I'm not too much on this slide. Again, data sheet, but the main ones I'd like to say is order there without the batteries fitted initially. So batteries not included. Okay. The other is a non-self-test. This inhibits the self-test functionality on the product. Now, not really a requirement for exterior products, but is commonly for interior products where we're trying to limit the risk of the luminaire going through self-test in the middle of the night, potentially while people are sleeping. Okay. The other point to note is regards to the emergency outputs. So if you order the emergency Protecta X, the product comes as 90 minutes as standard. If you want 3 hour / 3 suffix, okay, which will limit the battery duration. So to help you understand the potential benefits or potential savings that you can achieve by using Protecta X over other traditional boat style. So the three products that I'm going to be comparing over the coming slides is the Protecta 3 fluorescent, Protecta X O5L, and your Protecta 3 LED as well. All your 2x36 and your 5,000 lumen products. So looking at the first one, we're comparing the products side by side over a 10 by 10 meter area with the luminaires mounted at 2.5 meters. Really, the point of this slide is just to kind of give you a feel or show you how that light is being thrown and distributed around an area. So from the results, the Protecta GRPs will achieve round about 30 lux average, whereas the Protecta X will achieve round about 40 lux average. Okay, so it's essentially 30%, 33% higher. Now, you will also notice, though, that the uniformity is 2%. Okay, so it's the lowest out of all three, and that's due to a number of factors, really. The first thing I'll probably add, though, is it's not common for linears to be mounted 10 meters apart. I mean, usually they're within sort of 5 meters. Okay, so this is only a one-to-one comparison. In reality, the contribution of adjacent luminaires will help pick up that uniformity. For those of you that have done lighting design before, you will know that uniformity is a real challenge, especially for hazardous areas. So there's a lot of trial and error required to meet the minimum uniformity requirements of typically 25 to 40%. Okay, but in this one-to-one comparison, the Protecta X has a low uniformity purely because of, well, two things. One, it's got a flat diffuser, so you're not going to quite get as much sideways throw as you would with a deep bowl diffuser. Okay, and secondly, your fluorescent type products will typically have a better sideways throw, as you can see from this image here, this isolux contours. So because your fluorescent tube is essentially 360 degrees of light, it will always have a little bit more sideways throw than your traditional, well, sorry, than your new LED products. The downside of that, however, is you have less control over where that light is going. So you will find that in a fluorescent product, some of that light is being emitted up into the sky. Okay, essentially it's wasted light, spill light, leading to light pollution or sky glow. So we want to try and minimize that. Again, we're trying to encourage people to throw that light where it needs to go, utilize it efficiently, essentially meaning that you can reduce your overall power, overall product quantities, and have a more efficient solution across your facility. The other point I'd maybe like to highlight here, though, is that despite the fact that it's got a flat diffuser and it's very concentrated in this area, if you look at the yellow line, the 50 lux line, the Protecta X actually has the greatest coverage, excuse me, of 50 lux compared against all the other Protectas that I'm showing on here. Okay, so it actually has a greater spread of 50 lux than the LED version and the fluorescent models. If I then take that one step further and I look at a interior sample, in this case I'm looking at a small room with obstructions, as is typical, like a control room or a battery room, for instance, and I'm aiming to achieve 300 lux. Now the luminaires are all mounted at 2.5 meters on the ceiling, essentially. So looking at the Protecta 3 solution, so your fluorescent on the left-hand side and your Protecta 3 LED on the right-hand side, you require 16 Protecta fluorescents to achieve 300 lux versus 14 Protecta LEDs. Now that's essentially a reduction of 12.5% straight off the bat, 13% straight off the bat. If we look at Protecta X, you can then reduce that quantity even further, down to 12 units to achieve the same lighting level. That's a reduction of 25%, going from Protecta fluorescent down to Protecta X. If I look at the results here, just to show you that I'm not making this up, all achieving round about 300 lux, a little bit higher, and all achieving a pretty good uniformity. In reality, you know, typically for interior areas, you want to achieve a uniformity of around about 40% minimum. So I think the surprising thing when I did this calculation is that actually the best uniformity in these examples was Protecta X. Fewer products, flat diffuser, and still achieves the same performance, in fact, better performance. The next example I'd like to have a look at is for a walkway. So this is pretty common across all facilities. In this particular example, I've shown you a picture of an FPSO, where you have escape routes located probably along the length of the vessel itself. So pretty long, expansive walkways. Now, depending on site standard mounting preferences, you could have the luminaire mounted in two different orientations. On the left-hand side, I call this a swan neck bracket, with the luminaire mounted perpendicular to the walkway itself. Another option potentially is what I would call a goalpost type bracket, with the luminaire mounted parallel to the walkway. Okay, so it's all site standard. So depending on the orientation of your luminaire will probably determine the necessary asymmetric optic, whether it be ASW or ASL, that you should use. So looking at a calculation here, so I've looked at the typical spacing required to achieve 100 lux along the floor of a walkway, a 1 meter wide walkway. So all these luminaires are mounted parallel to the walkway at 2.5 meters with a 30-degree tilt, and this is essentially assuming a goalpost type configuration. So looking at the Protectas, so your Protecta LED at the top will achieve 6 meter spacing roundabout, whereas your Protecta fluorescent at the bottom will achieve 4.6 meter spacing thereabouts. Protecta X is dramatically greater than that at 7.3 meter spacing. So what does that actually mean? What does that actually mean in terms of numbers and quantities? And that's probably the key point here. So if we look at a sample 100 meter length, for example, you can reduce your number of linears from 22 fluorescents down to 14 Protecta X's. That's potentially a saving of 30 to 35% of linears. But it's not just about reduction in products anymore. It's about reduction in power. It's about reduction in accessories, so reduction in cable glands, reduction in junction boxes, potentially increased cable lengths off a single MCB. It's all about the big project savings now that we're trying to get across to people. Just an extra bit of information here, just to kind of show you that same walkway in emergency mode. So in emergency conditions or escape conditions, typically you want to achieve your 1 lux minimum along the walkway itself. What I can confirm from this is that despite, irrespective of whether it's Protecta GRP or Protecta fluorescent, Protecta LED or Protecta X, you still need every second luminaire to be an emergency product. But that is still significant in terms of your overall quantities. So looking at again at this 100 meter length, if you're looking at 50% as emergency, you still need 11 emergencies on the Protecta fluorescent, but you can get away with 7 emergencies on Protecta X. I'm sure you're all aware that the emergency version, the emergency product, tends to be the more premium option because of the battery pack, the inverter, and the intelligence that comes within the product itself. So if you can reduce your overall emergencies required in your project, that's a massive saving as well. So just the final couple of slides, really, just to show you the photometrics of the product. Apologies while I geek out a little bit here, but I wanted to kind of help you visualize why the light is working so efficiently in various applications. So the best thing to visualize here is to imagine the luminaire coming out of your screen. So if you can see this linear down in the corner here, the Protecta LED, essentially the luminaire is coming out of the screen itself. Okay. So in the case of an LED product, this is a very typical distribution, what I like to call a teardrop distribution. And it's typical of an LED product without optics. Okay. On your right hand side, you have the fluorescent distribution. Again, for me, it's pretty clear that there are two fluorescent tubes inside the product because you almost have two circles that meet in the middle here. Okay. So what I said before about fluorescence having a bit more sideways throw, you can see the shape of that throwing light out to the side of the product itself. However, please bear in mind that anything above this horizontal line is considered uplight. So in the case of Protecta fluorescent, there is a portion there of that light that is being wasted up into the sky. Okay. We want to ensure that as much of the light being generated by the light source is going to where you need it to go. The other thing to note on this really is with regards to the outer curve. Now the outer circle refers to the peak intensity, the maximum intensity measured on the luminaire. In the case of a Protecta fluorescent, your peak intensity, your maximum intensity is around about 1,200 candelas, and that is found at this point and at this point, almost straight below. In the case of a Protecta LED, your maximum intensity, peak intensity is around about 1,600 candelas and is directly below the luminaire itself. Now, if we look at the Protecta X, you can see the shape of that distribution is dramatically different. In the case of the ASL, your peak intensity or the peak intensity achieved is almost 5 times greater, well, it's just over 5 times greater than the Protecta fluorescent. But the point to note is that the peak intensity is at these points, really punching light up and down the walkway where you need it, where you want it to go. So just a little bit more information here between your ASL and ASW. I would add that for a more efficient, more effective solution, you should always try and use the ASL model above the ASW model. And that's more to do with the design of the product itself. You have roughly 4,800 lumen output on the ASL versus 4,300 lumen output on the ASW. Now that's really to do with the frame that's on the wing itself. So there is a bit of internal reflectance in there, hence why you can see this cutoff on the beam here. So there is some losses within the product. So for a more effective, and a potentially greater reduction of quantities, I would suggest you go with the ASL product over the ASW product. Okay, but I've just added these images here just to help you visualize where that light is being thrown from which orientation of the luminaire. Okay, so just in summary, why should you install the Protecta X? So, reduced installation time. Fewer linears on your project means less electrical consumables. Also, fewer cable terminations, so there's less products that you need to spend time and terminate the cable into. Reduced maintenance time and inspection time, so fewer linears means less EX equipment again. And also increased lifetime and battery management when you use the Protecta X. Reduced weight, so fewer lighter linears across your facility means less electrical equipment. Reduced power consumption, so this reduces the loading on your distribution boards, which potentially also means you can increase your quantities of luminaires or linears per circuit. All of this, though, adds to reduced total cost of ownership, and this is really the main point. The overall project savings that you can achieve by going Protecta X are phenomenal. So, with all of that in mind, that brings me to the end of my presentation. The Protecta X is available now. We formally launched it in May last year, with production fully ramped up around about October time last year. So the product is available, and it's certainly something that's generated a lot of interest so far. So at this point, obviously there's nobody on the line currently, but what I'd like to just do is address some of the questions that were raised during the webinars last week, and hopefully this will answer most of the issues or most of the questions that you might have had previously. So I'm just going to step through them. So the lifetime of the battery, I got asked. We still state 4 to 6 years on the emergency. This is the same as we state currently for the nickel cadmium. Really, the lifetime comes down to how you control the product, how you control the battery, and the ambience that it's exposed to. Okay, so as long as the self-test functionality on the Protecta X will help achieve the maximum lifetime that we want. So we'd like to see 6 years, but it just depends on the ambient temperatures that the product is exposed to. I got asked about the bracket options available. As I said in an earlier slide, we use the same mounting brackets as the Protecta 3 range. If there are specific mounting applications or specific areas that you'd like us to have a look at, then please let us know. We can certainly investigate that. The duration of the battery during self-test. Now this will depend on the age of the battery itself. A new battery cell should achieve much greater than you expect. So in the case of a 90-minute emergency, you should achieve a minimum of 2 hours at initial install. And for the 3-hour emergency, you should achieve a minimum of 4 hours, potentially even 5 hours at initial install. Okay. Over time, that battery duration will reduce just because of the age of the battery, but the self-test functionality will ensure or will advise when that battery no longer meets the minimum duration, i.e. it doesn't meet the 90-minute or 3-hour expected duration. Okay. Can the opal optic be used with asymmetric lenses or other lenses? The answer to that is yes. You can use the opal with any solution if you desire, but I would probably suggest that it's not really beneficial. I would suggest that if you want to use the opal, stick with the maximum output of the product, i.e. the wide beam solution, to achieve the greatest output achievable on the product. Now, as I said earlier in the presentation, the opal optic will reduce, the opal optic will have an impact on the output. And it will also negate the impact of the optics. Okay, so stick with the wide beam and opal where possible. What is the lifetime of the battery? Again, as I said before, sorry, this is 4 to 6 years. Can the end user replace optics at site? Now, in reality, the answer to that is no. They can't replace the optics, but users can replace the wings. It can't be done in situ, though. It must be taken down. Okay, but please bear in mind, I mean, the lifetimes that we're expecting out of the LEDs is significantly greater than 200,000 hours at the maximum rated ambient of 60. Possible to retrofit. For retrofitting existing 4-foot protectors, yes, the answer is yes, but we can pick up the same fixing centers, but you need to bear in mind about the cable product itself. It's not a retrofit gear tray like we offer on the Protecta LED, but it can be used to replace existing linears that you have on site currently. What is the life of the product? Now, we would fully expect the product itself or the enclosure of the luminaire to meet your expected project lifetimes, 25, 30 years, whatever that may be. But please bear in mind that there will be some component replacements required during the life of that product. Okay, that's what we're really referring to as system life. Okay, time to first component failure. In battery mode, do both strips reduce or does one side drop off? Now, this is probably more in reference to your traditional fluorescents. It's quite common for one tube on a fluorescent product to switch off and the other tube to be on a reduced output. In the case of, well, both our Protecta LED products, Protecta LED and Protecta X, all the LEDs will reduce down. Now that has the added benefit of maintaining the uniformity of that light and that throw of light over your area. The final question I had was, can you control the emergency output, or is it a factory setting only? The answer to that is it is a factory setting. I'm not aware of particular situations or scenarios where you might have a 90-minute and then want to change it to a 3-hour. If you have a particular requirement, then please, by all means, let me know. But it is defined at the factory. Okay, well that's all the questions that I got asked. I hope this presentation was useful and informative for all of you. But by all means, if you have any follow-up questions, or if there's things you'd like to know more about, then please either contact myself or your local sales engineer, and we'll do our best to assist. Okay. Until then, thank you for your time again, and I hope you're all keeping well and safe. Cheers, everyone.